Good afternoon, everybody. And I, Dr. Devanshu Shrivastava, on behalf of Jagran Lake City University and also on behalf of Droid Pinel Group, welcome you all on this occasion of the International Human Rights Day. I take this opportunity to wish each of us a very important day of our lives. Something that, yes, we are here to celebrate the 74th year of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. A day that only documented and brought towards what we call the human rights. But it is something, as we have all studied, that these are those rights which nobody can give us and nobody can take it from us. So I guess the speaker for our session would be joining in a couple of minutes. Good afternoon, Rakesh sir.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, sir.
Absolutely fine.
Sir. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. We'll just start, sir, in a couple of minutes.
No problem.
तो म्यूट होना मतलब चुप होना और अनम्यूट होना
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, Anubhuti, you are audible.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, you are all audible.
Okay, sir.
Anubhuti, please start.
Sure, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I, Anubhuti Agrawal, welcome you all in National Symposium on Human Rights on the occasion of International Human Rights Day, organized by Jagran Lake City University, Bhopal, and Droid Penal Group, Prayagraj. I would like to continue the session with a quick introduction about our organizing committees. Jagran Lake City University, Bhopal is a private university established under Section 2F of UGC Act 1956 and is based out of Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. JLU Bhopal is one of the fastest growing and one of the most awarded universities of Central India, having practice-based pedagogy at its core. Currently, the university is offering 50+ degree programs to more than 2,500 students from 8 countries and 25 states of India. The university has numerous partnerships with top industries and international educational institutions. ensuring the students get great exposure both nationally and internationally. JLU Bhopal is the only participating university from Central India ERAS MUS Plus program under the Tuning India project funded by European Commission and is also currently the country chair for Association of University of Asia Pacific AUAP. Jagan Lake City University became the first university in MP and Chhattisgarh to be awarded the diamond rating by QSI Gauge, an international rating agency, in June 2021. JLU has ranked 30th best private university in India by Education World in 2021 and also got the e-learning experience excellence for academic digitization e-lead certification 2022-21 by QSI Gauge. India Today and Outlook India has ranked Jagan School of Journalism and Mass Communication as number 1 in Madhya Pradesh and top 15 in India in 2020. Deroy Penal Group, a unit of Arjun Das Gulati Memorial Society, is registered under the Societies Registration Act 1860 with the Order of Registrar of Societies, has catered to the objective of Deroy Penal Group. The organization is signing MOUs with different universities, colleges, and organizations for the welfare and encouragement of young minds in the research and publication. Deroy Penal Group is an initiative taken in the field to provide the discussions on minute nuances involved in the intricacies of law in simple and qualified manner. The Deroy Penal Indian Law Journal on IPR was established in 2019 and DP Newsletter in 2019 and Deroy Penal Publication in year 2020 under the banner of Deroy Penal Group, a unit of Arjun Das Gulati Memorial Society. Now I would request Dr. Devanshu Srivastav sir, Head Faculty of Law, Jagan Lake City University, Bhopal, to please deliver welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Anubhuti. So as I would like to start, that it is indeed a pleasure to welcome each one of you today to what we call the Human Rights Day. I know one day cannot suffice or cannot confine the human rights. The glorious Human Rights Day is the most auspicious day for our Manav Dharma, a day that signifies the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the member countries of the United Nations in 1948. So that amounts to the 74th celebration of the World International Human Rights Day. Human rights are the ethos and the values prevailing in the Indian culture and tradition have been codified in our Golden Constitution, which also forms the part of the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. India, as the largest democracy globally, having unity in diverse religions, cultures, faiths, languages, and food items as well. The disparity in political, socio-economic conditions of the nation and the people call for different solutions. Economic equality, social justice, and participation in the governance protect the human rights. Our bright future depends on removing inequality, ignorance, illiteracy, diseases, and poverty. A land of Mahatma Gandhi, a land of the principles of Mahatma Gandhi. Today is the day of reiterating the message of the constructive evolution by stopping the destructive mentality. The task is to prevent violence, combat terrorism and crime. Terrorism violates the human rights. Countries advancing terrorism must be held accountable. And these were the external factors. Internal factors include the dominance of a caste-based violence. It also includes the violence happening at homes with the women and the children. These are the threat to human rights. The world faces the challenge caused by growing terrorism, shrinking democratic space, intimidations, reprisals, and complaints of grave violation of gender rights. Aghast is migration, problems, issues of refugees, and that of displaced persons. The Human Rights Day is about equality. All human, all equal. Equality is the essence of human rights. It requires upholding justice and dignity in every walk of life. we have to provide protective discrimination by providing compensatory justice to those who have suffered injustice and violation of their human rights. With this, I once again welcome each of the participants to this one-day national symposium on the human rights, and would also congratulate the Droid Penal team, Gaurav sir and his able team, that with his venture, when we are collaborating to make this event a very successful one. So thank you so much, Gaurav sir. And I would also like to welcome Honorable Rakesh Pandey sir for sparing out time, and we are very excited to hear what sir's insights are there on the topic of human rights. I'm also thankful to Professor Dr. Sandeep Shastri sir, who, in spite of his busy schedule, has agreed, and his words on the human rights and its present context would always be a pleasure to listen on to. With this, I would also welcome all the participants to not only take this as a symposium or as a lecture to be taken on to, but keep it interactive. You can use your chat boxes to pose the questions which both of our speakers, the learned speakers for today, would be answering and commenting over that particular points. So with this, I welcome each one of you in this session, and pretty hopeful that the next 1.5 hours is going to be something very contributory towards the human rights study. Over to you, Anubhuti.
Thank you so much, sir. I would like to invite our guest of honor, Shri Rakesh Pandey sir, Senior Advocate, High Court of Judicature at Allahabad, Prayagraj. Mr. Rakesh Pandey sir is a Senior Designated Advocate at High Court of Judicature at Allahabad. Sir has joined the bar in year 1987 and was designated as a Senior Advocate in the year 2018. Sir so has been the president of Allahabad High Court Bar Association and also has been the member of various committees at Allahabad High Court. I would like to request sir to please take over the session.
Thank you, Anubhuti. And good afternoon to all of you. Namaskar. Before I start on the subject for today, I would really like to thank Gaurav and your esteemed university for giving me this chance to interact with youngsters, faculty members of this esteemed university, which, as Google tells me, is engaged in igniting minds and changing times. I'm really overwhelmed to be here and to be welcomed as the guest of honor. I also feel blessed to share this platform with Professor Shastri, Vice Chancellor, Jagran University, Gaurav Gulati, Dr. Srivastav. Their presence overwhelms me, and in the company of such stalwarts, I don't know whether I'll be able to do justice to the topic. Gentlemen, we confer today to celebrate and observe and discuss Human Rights Day. Rights which are inalienable to all human beings and which should be universally available to all human beings, unfortunately, which are not. Unfortunately, for the greater part of our history, human rights have been trampled upon on account of greed, lack of empathy, self-interest, fear, and baser passions of mankind. All life starts with certain basic freedoms. The freedom to live, the freedom to breathe, the freedom to grow and realize its potential. The process of realizing its potential, or what we call self-fulfillment of a human being, that sometimes starts at a certain point of time, confronting the self-realization or the realization of potential of the other individuals or other state entities. Now, this confrontation, this point of intersection, perhaps it is here that human rights start taking a back seat. I have the freedom to live, but if your freedom to live comes in my way, historically, I have been trying to trample upon your freedom to live. only to perpetuate my freedom to live. So perhaps human rights is more a question of duties and a less a question of rights. History tells us that all great empires, be it the Mongol Empire, Genghis Khan was ruling over perhaps the largest swath of land in history, the great Romans, the Turkish Empire, and closer at home, the Magadha Empire, the Ashokan Empire. All these empires have been built on conquest, plunder, appropriation of rights, greed, self-interest, and so on. For the greater part of human history, we have been violating human rights through enslavement, torture, discrimination, disregard of life, disregard of the right of the meek and of the ordinary. In fact, Ashoka perhaps is the only king, the only conqueror who realized the futility of it all. And after the Kalinga War, he spent his life in quest for peace, preaching Buddhism, taking the philosophy of peace to far lands. But apart from that solitary example, I have not come across any other example in history where trampling of human rights has developed any kind of guilt in any emperor. It was only the horrors of the Second World War, its human tragedies, mayhem. Large sections of Jews were sentenced to pogroms. People all over the world suffered. And perhaps this suffering started weighing upon our minds, the minds of our leaders. It was for the first time after the Second World War that humanity started collecting together and talking about human rights. It was in this background that in 1948, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was an event that would profoundly influence the development of international human rights law. This was the first time when the Committee of Nations got together and started thinking in terms of preventing, protecting, extending human rights to all. It was a time of realization. It was an epochal time in history. In December 1966, the United Nations General Assembly adopted two international treaties that concretized international human rights. These two treaties were the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, commonly known as the ICESCR, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, commonly called the ICCPR. These are often referred to as the international covenants. Now, once the covenants were drawn up, the problem of implementation crops up. The human rights bodies are committees which are independent, and these committees on the economic and social rights are independent mechanisms to monitor the rights under the two covenants. Now, I will read to you some of the rights which are protected by the covenants. These are very interesting. It may appear to be a little boring, but the rights are very interesting in the context of the fact that these are perhaps rights which are protected by our Constitution. The Fundamental Rights chapter in our Constitution appears to be a constitutional protection to the Indian public, where all human rights have been protected. All possible contemplated human rights by the international covenants are already there, protected in our Constitution. Now, the rights, some of the rights are common to both the protocols, the ICESCR and the ICCPR. They are freedom from discrimination. Now, if we cut back to our Constitution, Article 14, 15, and 16, these are the protections which are provided by our Constitution of preventing discrimination on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. The covenants also seek to protect discrimination. Because if you look at history, most trampled upon human rights are the right of equality. Equality means equality before the law, economic equality, cultural equality, social equality. Right from the times of Athens and the Athenian democracies, equality perhaps is one of the most important, fundamental, basic, inalienable human rights. Both the covenants protect the right to equality between men and women and freedom from discrimination. Now, the ICCPR also proceeds to enumerate certain other rights like the right to life, freedom from torture, freedom from slavery, right to liberty. The right to be treated with humanity in detention, freedom of movement, freedom of non-citizens from arbitrary expulsion, right to fair trial, right to recognition before the law, right to privacy, freedom of religion and belief, freedom of expression, right of peaceful assembly, freedom of association, right to marry and found a family, right of children to birth, registration, and a nationality, right to participate in public affairs, right to equality. Now, I could have asked you to refer to your books, but I was reading these rights simply because in our context in India, all these rights you will find enshrined in the chapter relating to fundamental rights. And what is not enshrined has been brought within the ambit of a fundamental right through interpretation of Article 21. Right to life has been expanded from time to time, and today it includes the right to live with dignity, the right to clean water, the right to health, right to food, so many other rights which are otherwise inalienable rights, which may not have been contemplated in 1948 when the Constitution was drafted, or 49 when the Constitution was drafted. Those rights have been brought within the status of a constitutional fundamental right by enhancing the parameters or the scope of Article 21 and the right to life as enshrined therein. Similarly, the educational, social, and cultural covenants, they talk about right to work, freedom to choose and accept work, right to form trade unions, right to strike, right to social security, right of mothers to special protection before and after birth, freedom of children from social and economic exploitation, right to an adequate standard of living, and so on. Now, the economic, social, and cultural rights are rights which need to be protected by the executive. The rights are there, but they have to be protected by the executive as well as the legislature. In the Indian context, the right to assembly would include the right to form a trade union. Right of free movement is already there. Right of free expression is already there. Article 19 is a very comprehensive article. It substantially covers almost every possible human right which can be contemplated or which can be thought of. The question arises that are these empty rights? There is the Declaration of 1948. There are the two covenants. And there are a string of treaties. Most of them have been ratified by most nations, at least the nations which we call civilized nations, the nations which we call democracies. They have mostly ratified most of the treaties which have been drawn up under the covenant. And still we have Palestine. Self-determination is still an issue almost in every corner of the world. I would say discrimination, gender discrimination continues to exist. So what does the General Assembly do? What does the United Nations do? Now, the United Nations has an obligation to protect and fulfill these rights, has constituted certain committees which are the independent monitors. And these committees are independent bodies. They are there to monitor and ensure the extension of the human rights as contemplated by the Declaration of Human Rights which of course was on 10 December 1948, which we are celebrating today, and the covenants and the treaties drawn thereunder. Now, the best part of these rights is that one of these rights is always linked to another. Violation of one will lead to violation of another. You will find people being forcibly evicted from their homes. Now, this is against the right to adequate housing or the right to choose his or her place of residence. You will find children being discriminated on the ground of special disabilities. There are children who would be especially disabled. They'll be discriminated. They would be segregated in a class for whatever reasons. I have seen that happening personally. I think these are small things which have to be issued at an individual level as also at institutional levels. We cannot wait for the state to secure our rights, especially some rights which have to be addressed by us. With the passage of time, certain international conventions and treaties have also taken shape, wherein the signatory nations have ratified the protocols and feel duty bound to protect the rights which are subject matter of the treaty. India has ratified at least 5 international treaties under these protocols. I will name them. It is a signatory to 5 conventions, namely the Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, International Covenant on Civil and Public Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, Convention on Discrimination Against Women, Convention on Rights of the Child. There are certain treaties which we have not ratified, we have not signed yet, but these are 5 international treaties which we have signed, which we have ratified, and which we are duty bound to protect, secure, and make available to our citizens. Having ratified the above protocols, we are duty bound to advance and protect these rights. Fortunately, most of these human rights, as I already said, are enshrined in our constitution, and having been enshrined in the constitution, they are the normal available rights to all citizens or even people residing within the territory of this India. The legislature in India is bound by certain parameters. It cannot take away certain basic features of the constitution. Article 21, fundamental rights, all these being basic features of the constitution, they cannot be amended, they cannot be derogated, they cannot be taken away from. So essentially, our constitution, our courts do protect our human rights for all times to come. This I say with a caveat that when these rights are constitutionally protected, it is now the duty of the executive to ensure that transgressions do not take place. Because executive transgressions are very surreptitious. Even without realizing that a right is being trampled upon, rights can be taken away. For one instance, I would say this philosophy of bulldozers, it does not have the sanction of law. A person may be a wrongdoer. For that, there's a process of law which he can be subjected to. But to demolish a house, personally, I think that is a huge transgression on the part of the executive. There's always an explanation that the house was illegally constructed. Unfortunate part is that the illegal construction comes to mind only when the man is found transgressing certain limits which are not politically convenient. That, I say, is a surreptitious exercise of executive power which can always take away human rights and which has always taken away human rights. And I am being among students, I continue this repeatedly because I believe that you are the future of this nation. You will be the next executive, the legislature, the judiciary. The duty is very heavy on you to understand what human rights are, what sacrifices have been made to ensure that the meek, the ordinary, they are protected from illegal action. Their rights continue. They are not discriminated against. For this realization, if the youngsters realize it today, our future tomorrow is secure. The National Human Rights Commission in India was also constituted on 12th October 1993. It is charged with the protection of human rights, and it has been given a statutory basis by the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. Now, apart from the courts, our seriousness toward the protection of human rights is reflected not only in the constitution of the National Human Rights Commission, giving the statutory recognition to human rights, but also the fact that almost every state has a human rights commission. There's a process to apply for protection of human rights. And my personal experience is that the commissions are active. Their activity does ensure some kind of action on the part of the executive in case some violation is brought to the notice. End of the day, and I know I've been talking to you for quite some time now. Gaurav, I promise that I'll end within 10 or 12 minutes. I think my time is almost near over, although I'm not very sure about what exactly the time is. But one thing, youngsters, one thing, faculty members, one thing, Honorable Vice Chancellor, every right is only a product of the collective will of the people. It is our strength, our will, which will continue to protect rights, make them available to youngsters, make them available to those who are weak and need of protection. Personally, most of you would be coming from families which are strong, which really do not need protection of the rights, which are capable of protecting the rights. But always, always keep in mind the last man in line. The last man in line is the man who needs your empathy, is the man who needs protection of his rights, is the man who is in need of all our efforts, all our strength to sustain him, to create conditions for his self-fulfillment, to make it possible for him to realize his potential. Gentlemen, I will say au revoir, but before I sign off, I will leave you with a few questions. The questions are that despite 74 years of human rights declaration, we continue to have a deficit of human rights all over the world. We have problems in Palestine, we have problems in Sri Lanka, we have problems in Afghanistan, we have problems everywhere, problems of inequality, problems of discrimination, even problems of enslavement, torture, whatnot. We have an ongoing war in Ukraine, where every day you find that one nation is directing its missiles some very, very close to some nuclear plants of the other nation. Are we really human rights? Are we done with it? Are we in a position to protect the human rights? And are we up to it? This is something which I leave to you. It is for you to decide, gentlemen. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Anubhati. And a special thanks to the Vice Chancellor and the faculty members. Good day.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us with your knowledge. Now I would like to invite Dr. Sandeep Shastri, sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Jagra Lake City University, Bhopal. Dr. Sandeep Shastri is currently the Vice Chancellor of Jagran Lake City University, Bhopal, with close to 4 decades of experience in fields of research and teaching. Dr. Shastri is a social scientist who has been the Pro-Vice Chancellor of JEN, a deemed to be university, for over a decade, Director of the Research and Training Wing of the JEN Group of Institutions for 5 years, and a faculty in the Department of Political Science at Bangalore University for 2 decades. His research has largely been in the field of electoral studies, federalism, political processes, and institutions and the teaching learning process. He is the co-chair of the Research Committee of International Political Science Associations that focuses on public opinion research. He is the national coordinator of the Loka Niti Network and All India Network of Social Scientists involved in survey-based election and opinion studies. Dr. Shastri has authored over 13 books, more than 50 chapters in edited books, and more than 100 articles in reputed research journals. As a political commentator, he has written more than 350 articles in English, Kannada, and Hindi in renowned newspapers and online portals. He is an election and political analyst for India Today TV and appears frequently on CNBC, News 18, and Republic TV. Dr. Shastri is a consultant to the UNDP and was involved in their political party reforms project in the Pacific Rim countries. He has been a consultant to the World Bank for its governance reforms project in Nepal. He is the senior advisor to the Forum of Federations and its lead consultant on political transitions in Myanmar, constitutional reforms in South Sudan, and federal processes in Sudan. Dr. Shastri has lectured at universities in over 50 countries in all the 6 inhabited continents. In his career, he has been a South Ford Foundation Fellow, Indo-Canadian Fellow, International Visitor Program Fellow. Dr. Shastri was privileged to play a key role in drafting Kannad's youth policy by serving as the chairman of drafting committee of the said policy. A warm welcome to you, sir. I now request Dr. Sandeep Shastri, sir, to please address the gathering.
Thank you, Anubhuti, for that very warm words of welcome. Rakesh Pandeyji, Gaurav Gulati-ji, my colleagues at the university, my student friends, and other distinguished guests. On the outset, I welcome to everybody to this function which Jagran Lake City University is privileged to co-host, and it's been truly mesmerizing to hear Rakesh Pandeyji speak, and the eloquence with which he asserted the importance of the celebration of today is, I think, something which will remain with all of us for quite some time to come. I would like to use my time to focus on 5 issues which I think is important today. As we celebrate the Human Rights Day, I think there are 5 dimensions which I'd like to share with you. Some of them may be unconventional, but then not being from the law fraternity where we need to follow rules, norms, and regulations, I can take the privilege of being unconventional, being a social scientist. And that's the insurance policy I take for myself, that I can get away by saying that because I'm a social scientist. Now, what are the 5 points I want to make? Point number 1 for me is what I would call the non-negotiability of human rights. I think that's an issue on which there is no question of a debate of for or against. These are rights inalienable to people and are non-negotiable, period. For me, that would be the starting point of my analysis, of my narration. That I would see human rights as something which is essentially non-negotiable. And it's not a question of give and take. It's not a question of you do this, so I do this. Be it the state, be it the law, be it the authorities, be it those who regulate the lives of common citizens. I think the fact of the non-negotiability of human rights is something which I would like to assert as my first point. To expand on that, let me make 4 other points. For me, while human rights are required to be guaranteed, I think the fact of guaranteeing them does not imply a celebration of human rights. This is something, if I could use another context statement, human rights are not a gift to be conferred, but a habit to be acquired by society. Nobody gives you your human rights. Nobody grants you your rights. Nobody needs to guarantee you your rights. It is yours as a human being. It's not a gift that any constitution or any country or any law or any society. It is yours by right. And that, I think, is something which I believe Indian tradition recognizes. If you go back to ancient Indian tradition, For me, the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is a symbol of this acceptance of the rights as being something inalienable to you. When Kautilya and other ancient Indian works talked about Rajadharma, the duty of a king, and to quote the Arthashastra, it says, it is in the happiness of his people lies the happiness of the king. It's in the welfare of the people lies the welfare of the king. The whole concept of Yogakshema, which the ancient Indian philosophy talks about, I think all this for me symbolizes the duty, responsibility of authority to guarantee the right and not to give the right. And I'm making that very, 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 very critical distinction. It's not something conferred by the state. It is something guaranteed by the state. You do not confer on somebody something that is her or his inalienable right. That's the second point, which as a student of the social sciences, I'd like to make. Linked to that would be my third point. And my third point, I will bring in a concept we have made very popular today, Atmanirbhar Bharat. I think when we talk of Atmanirbhar Bharat, it is not about technology and tools, it's not about productivity and foreign exchange, but Atmanirbhar Bharat is about the emancipation of the mind. Can we as people in India emancipate our mind to think independently? That is the Atmanirbhar Bharat, I believe, that we need to build in this country. And that Atmanirbhar Bharat is about, for me at least, something very critical. This is a land of diversity in all its myriad manifestations. And as students of law and practitioners of law, I would like to ask you this question. Have we for too long focused on toleration of diversity, accommodation of diversity, rather than the celebration of diversity? When I say I tolerate diversity, it means I tolerate it often because I don't have a choice. You give me a choice, I won't tolerate it. When I accommodate diversity, I'm saying I'm keeping some space for diversity. Okay, come, here is space for diversity also. But friends, is genuine human rights about celebrating our diversity? Not just tolerating or accommodating it, but celebrating it. So Rakeshji, I often ask the question, should we move from unity in diversity to unity through diversity? Is human rights about unity through diversity? Not saying diversity all fine, but I want a unity. But is it about saying that the real, true, authentic diversity, a unity of this country is a byproduct of the diversity being recognized in this country? The building blocks of unity in this country is the fact of diversity of this society, which we as citizens need to celebrate. My fourth point, and Rakeshji, I'm seeking a departure from our Western perspectives of human rights when I make this fourth point. Has the human rights discourse emphasized for too long individual rights without so much focusing on collective rights? In societies like ours, in Afro-Asian countries, while individual rights are critical, I think what's much more critical is the guaranteeing of group rights, is the guaranteeing of community rights, because in Afro-Asian societies, the sense of community, the sense of bonding, the sense of being part of a larger social reality becomes very important. So as young lawyers and as young students of law, can we somewhere bring in the entire concept of individual rights and also group rights? I think when we look at ancient Indian tradition, when you look at the old Indian joint family system, Some of us who were brought up in families where you had several elders and several kids at home, when you fell down, your mother need not necessarily come to look after you because you fell down. Some elder would come and take care of you. And every elder would see it as a responsibility to take care of all the kids who were present there. Not my children and your children. It was truly a situation of our children in that community that we lived in. Now, have we lost that sense of community somewhere? Have we lost that sense of our group identity somewhere and are only privileging and highlighting the fact of individual rights? Not for a moment am I saying individual rights are not important. What I'm saying is the fact of group rights are equally important. With which I come to my last point, and I would prefer to actually leave more time for a dialogue on questions if there are any. And my last point is a simple point. Famous speeches at the Delhi Boat Club. He made a very profound statement many years ago. And the statement, when I heard it for the first time, I couldn't think of anything else for several minutes. He said, freedom and right is not about its being enjoyed, but it's about what are the consequences that you have to face. And I quote him, he said, freedom after the speech is more important than freedom of the speech. Freedom after the speech. That is really what freedom of speech is all about. You are allowed to speak. Speak as much as you like. But that there is that fellow waiting there to nab you and put you in so that you never, ever speak again. So this warning that Nariman gave us years ago, that rights are not just about what you enjoy, but rights are about the consequences that come thereafter. Is there a security kavach, if you may, for that status also? And for me, that's the highest point of celebrating human rights. And ultimately, I would like to close with Evelyn Beatrice Hill's Evelyn Beatrice Hall's famous statement, which I feel should be the core of any dialogue on human rights. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend till death your right to say it. For me, this is the highest celebration of human rights, where I'm not guaranteeing you alone something. I'm not simply conferring something to you, but I go back to my initial point that as people, as independent individuals, we enjoy a right which is not conferred on us, but it is ours inalienable. And going back to ancient Indian tradition, remember the bell which was there outside the palace of the king. Remember that bell which anybody could go and ring. And when anybody rang that bell, the king was required to come out and ask the citizen, what is it that requires you to ring that bell? And the citizen had a right to dialogue with the authority because it was his right to dialogue and it was the king's duty to be available for that dialogue. Can that be the narrative of the relationship between power and those that power is exercised over? As we celebrate the Declaration of Rights and as we celebrate Human Rights Day, can we, as Rakesh Pandeyji said, focus on that last person? The talisman that Mahatma Gandhi gave, that if you want to ask yourself if a policy is valid or not, think of that person who was the most deprived you ever knew and ask yourself if what you are doing is going to help that person or not. That, he said, was the talisman for everyone who had the privilege of enjoying power on behalf of the people. And I'd like to thank both the organizations, my Faculty of Law and also Dwight Pennelly Group for having organized this event. And I do hope this will lead to very, very many more collaborations. And thank you for having me here. And I do hope I have not overstretched my time.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
sir.
so much, sir. Yeah. So, Anubhuti, before I get back to you, I just like to put
Sure,
some
sir.
very important points laid down by both the speakers. And where Rakesh sir basically pointed on the legal side, and Sandeep sir very well took the social scientist approach on that point. I'm also taking a cue from what sir said at the last. Let us ring the bell to open the dialogue as well of this forum also, so that that dialogue can be initiated. So we are opening the forum. With the paucity of time, we'll be taking 3 or 4 questions. I would request the participants to either use the chat box, or they can put the request of unmuting themselves and taking and posing their questions. In case you are asking your questions, kindly introduce yourself and also address that in which of the speaker you would like to pose this question to. By the time we are getting the first question, either through the chat box or I would like to pose a question, and this question lies to either of the speaker, but majorly towards Sandeep sir. Sir, we saw, I guess this is a week where the election mandates of different states, some being the municipal elections, some being couple of being the state elections. Don't you feel, or what according to you shall be the more expressive way of or the right to vote can brought to be a more expressive form of the human rights in our country?
Dr. Divanshu, yesterday at the fag end of one of the programs, day first today, at the fag end of one of the programs, I was asked, who is the real winner today? Because BJP won Gujarat and Congress won Himachal and AAP won MCD. So I was asked, who is the real winner today? I gave a split of the moment answer. I said, real winner today is the citizen of India. The citizen of India has demonstrated the diversity of choices that she makes. That the citizen of India has asserted their right as citizens and told political parties, don't take us for granted. So Divanshu, as a student of politics, I have always felt that respecting that voice of the voter is the most important assertion of the right of every citizen to be heard. And for me, that's why democracy is a celebration of that right of the citizen. Many people say India is an election-only democracy. I restore to that. At least India is an election-only democracy. We should try to become a more vibrant one. But why do we have such a high turnout in India? It's because the voter that day becomes empowered and wants to come out and assert her right, assert his right. Now, for me, that transformation of India that you see in the assertion of the rights of the people in small ways, in apparently insignificant moments, over time, is the celebration of that presence of the people. When Dr. Ambedkar said 1 person, 1 vote, 1 value, years ago in his, I think in his last speech in the Constituent Assembly, what we are actually seeing in practice is that, and that for me is the high point of the practice of human rights in this country. Not that violations don't happen, they do, and they need to be challenged and they need to be corrected. But I think the celebration of that status of the Indian citizen when he or she stands in that line to vote, for me, is the greatest salute to democracy.
Thank you so much, sir. I guess that would...
Komal Shukla has a question. I don't think we are actually enjoying our human rights, as some people are not even aware about the same. So are there any other ways to let people... Komal, you're so right. Today we fight corruption, but that does not mean corruption was born yesterday. Deviation of law was always there. But the desire to fight the deviation of law was not there. Today, the desire to fight that is there. So you're 100% right. Days like today need to be days where we actually take this movement out. My appeal to Devanshu and Yash is next year, we should do this program through a clinic which we hold in different places. I want Jagran Lake City University's Faculty of Law. If we are 24 of us, we should be spreading in 24 different locations across the state, at least across Bhopal, in spreading literacy or legal literacy vis-a-vis our rights. So that's the next step we need to take forward. And that would be the address, or that would be my answer to the question that Komal has raised.
Thank you, sir. We have, sir, one more question, and if I can request Dr. Katyani ma'am to unmute and take that question.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah, there is an echo, so you are coming from maybe two devices.
No, sir. In the room, actually, all computers are connected, so probably that is.
Maybe your colleagues around you have to put themselves on mute. Otherwise, that echo will come. Yeah, go ahead, Katyani.
So my question is simply that you talked about collective rights as well. So in case of clash between collective rights and individual rights, we should be giving primacy to which?
Katyani, was that question to Rakesh ji or to me?
Sir, to you, because you spoke about collective rights.
I'm sorry, Katyani, I got disturbed with somebody else asking me something. I couldn't hear what you said.
Okay, sir. So I just wanted to ask you this, that in case of conflict between collective rights and individual rights, we should be giving primacy to which of the two?
You are also a student of politics, so you will be able to answer this as well as I can. I think it's contextual. Is it primacy to the rights of an individual or primacy to group rights? I think at the end of the day, it depends on what is the context in which you are fighting for that rights. If you're fighting for a right which involves community rights, which involves the rights of a segment of society, I think then it is that you privilege community rights. When the context is very much linked to a person or to an individual or what he or she needs to, as an individual, enjoy, I think you focus on that. And at the end of the day, you do a balancing. Like, I don't want to open a debate here on that, but then if in my class, my students were to ask me the defense of reservations, I would always say, I would need to separate the philosophy of reservation and the practice of reservation. There may be complications with the practice of reservation, but I should not have a challenge with the philosophy of reservation, because if I do, I have not understood the unequal nature of India. So I'm there talking of the rights of a group of people who have been denied their equal rights for long, and therefore as a group of people required to be privileged and required to be given those rights which is rightfully theirs. Now, when I come to implementation, yes, there are challenges, the wrong people getting it, those who should get not getting it. So here you have a combination of the individual right as well as the group rights. And you privilege one depending on the context in which you talk about it.
Thank you, sir. I just have one more question, and this question, I guess, leads to Rakesh, sir. So the question is by Murun R. Sir, you mentioned about the freedom of speech is there. Should be basic frame of reference to protect one after allegation of hurting public sentiments. So Rakesh, sir, what would be your take in that? Rakesh, sir, you're mute. Rakesh, sir, you are mute, sir.
राकेश जी आप muted हैं, आपकी आवाज सुनाई नहीं दे रही है.
Gaurav, sir, I would request if you can unmute, sir.
Sir, can you just unmute yourself from your system?
Yes, Rakesh, sir, you're audible now.
Okay. Yes, could you repeat the question? We've taken a lot of time unmuting.
So the question is that you mentioned about the freedom of speech. So after the speech, there should be a basic frame of reference to protect one after the allegations of hurting public sentiments.
See, when you talk of freedom of speech, then you have to keep in mind that every right has a corresponding duty. Your freedom of speech does not impinge on another person's freedom. It could be his freedom to move. It could be his freedom of religion. It could be a lot of freedoms that another person could have. So when you talk of freedoms, freedoms are never boundless. Every freedom you have a corresponding duty. When you talk of free speech, then there's a corresponding duty that you will speak that which is acceptable to society, that which will not hurt somebody else's freedom. So if you remember, initially also I said when we talk of human rights or any other rights, I think we should talk a lot more about duties, because every right, I have a right to freedom to move, but I cannot move into Pakistan. The moment I try to move into Pakistan, I am transgressing my freedoms. I am transgressing the freedoms of others also. So see, every freedom, as I said, it has a corresponding right, and you have to consider it is now, as Dr. Shastri said, things are contextual. Today, my freedom of speech may be important in the context of a particular thing. But if that freedom of speech has to be weighed by the time, by the place, by a lot of other variables. So whenever you talk of freedom, just be very sure that your freedoms are always burdensome. They carry a lot of luggage, they carry a lot of duties, corresponding duties, and those freedoms have to be exercised within those parameters.
Thank you, sir. I guess this is one of those areas where we've been taking that, yes, how the human rights and the importance of human rights, what was basically enshrined in the UDHR in 1948. And 74 years down the line, we are still adhering to, adding to, so that it should not be a dead carpet where only what was enshrined in 1948 should be the part of it. So with this, we come to the end of this session. Anubhuti, I'll move this session to you so that you can take it ahead from here.
Thank you so much, sir. Now moving forward towards the successful end of inaugural day, I would request the Director of Deloitte Penal Group, Mr. Gaurav Gulati, sir, to please take over the session and also to end the session with a formal vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Very good evening to all our distinguished guests present here and the Faculty of Law, Jagran Lake City University, headed by Dr. Devanshu Srivastava sir, Rakesh sir, who accepted our invitation on a very small notice, and Sandeep Shastri sir, who has always been supporting us for these events which collaboratively organized by Jagran Lake City University and Droid Penal Group, Prayagraj. So it is always a pleasure giving the vote of thanks for every event we organize, and my humble gratitude to Rakesh Pandey sir, who spoke really very good for the on the occasion of the human rights, wherein we had a word with sir regarding the human rights and his topic and certain other things. So sir said कि ये कहते हैं, I will not be speaking more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But sir, you spoke for 25, 26 minutes. And
I'm sorry.
thank you so much, sir, for giving your precious time. Although we know that you have a lot of things to do these days, so you are busy with some other things. So thank you so much, sir, for coming on online platform and giving us an insight on human rights. And thank you so much, Sandeep sir, for being a part of this and supporting our organization to collaborate with your prestigious institution at Bhopal. And thank you, Devanshu sir. On a very short notice, you also took my invitation to collaborate and have this event. And a warm greetings to all our participants who joined this session. Thank you so very much, everyone.
Can we leave?